What does it mean to live more with less? I'm Katie Wells, and welcome to the Maximized Minimalist Podcast. If you found yourself caught up in the hamster wheel of modern-day motherhood and want to rewrite the script, congratulations, you're in the right place. I'm here to be your guide and help you take back your motherhood and achieve a simpler, more joy-filled life. Cheers to being a maximized minimalist. Enjoy the show. Dr. Lockhart, welcome to the Maximized Minimalist Show. This has been like years in the making, I feel like, right?
I agree. Yes.
I don't know if I was following you first on Instagram or how it happened, but I have been following you for years. And then we started messaging and commenting on each other. We're like, yes, we need to make something amazing together. So finally it has happened. We are here for 2025 and all these exciting guests. So welcome.
Yes. And thank you for having me. I follow you. I watch your stuff on YouTube and I just love everything that you put out there. It's just such great quality content. So I'm so glad that we get to do this collaboration.
Thank you. Well, to kick things off, so you're my first guest of the year. We're starting a new tradition here on the show. And it starts off with a question. And that question is, if you could magically declutter one thing from your life forever with no effort required, what would it be?
Automatically, papers. Papers are my nemesis. Like, it's so hard for me to declutter paper because I keep feeling like, well, I might need this. And then if I file it, where do I file this? Then it starts to pile up and then I shove it somewhere. So papers, if I could just magically know how to file, declutter, get rid of, shred, that would be the thing. Definitely.
I think you are like hitting something here because this is what I hear very frequently when I ask this question to my students. Paper, like the paper cracks. It is like,
yes.
So, okay, after this, I'm going to make a note to send you my I have a little cheat sheet and masterclass I'm going to send your way. So we'll get you squared away and then get that solved for you.
That's great. I appreciate that.
So today, I'm bringing you in for your expertise, and obviously just because I've always wanted to hang out with you to talk about ADHD and executive function and these strategies for better decision-making and focus, which of course go hand in hand with, decluttering, planning, organizing, cleaning up, managing our stuff, all these things. And I know that there's growing awareness around ADHD in adults. I mean, I would say once a month, I have a student email me and say, hey, I was just diagnosed with ADHD. A lot of my students are female and, getting diagnosed later in life compared to a lot of our younger, kiddos. So can you explain what ADHD is and how it impacts day-to-day life, particularly when it comes to, again, things like focus, organizing, decision-making?
Yes, great question. And I get this question a lot as well, too. So to make it really kind of break it down, ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And people sometimes will say, well, I have ADD. ADD isn't actually a diagnosis anymore. They got rid of that a couple decades ago. It was replaced by ADHD inattentive type. So there's three types of ADHD. There's ADHD inattentive type, ADHD hyperactive impulsive type, and ADHD combined type. You don't outgrow it, but your brain and your body and your mind starts to learn how to adapt to it. Or you marry someone who's better at the things, or you have an assistant or whatever, you delegate it out. But it's a neurological condition and it's a dysregulation disorder. It's an executive functioning dysregulation disorder. And that means that it affects how things are regulated, like your attention, your emotions, your thoughts, your behaviors. So it's not just about lack of attention, it's about dysregulation of everything. So it could even be where people feel like, I feel very emotional, I get easily upset, I'm very sensitive to people's insults or comments. I, get easily triggered by things. So it's all about all that stuff. And executive functioning is the command center of our brain. It's the thing that helps us to execute function. So it helps us to know where to put the papers. It helps us to start a task and how to finish it. It helps us to manage our emotions, how to process things quickly, how to remember. It's also where our personality is. So when people's like, oh, I'm so type A, I'm very organized. Like that's all executive functioning. It helps us make decisions. And it helps, there's so many different things, but it really helps with executing functions. But the kicker about it is it's in the prefrontal cortex, which is in the front part of our head. And all of our other lobes are done growing and developing when we're born. But the prefrontal cortex, or the frontal lobe where executive functioning is, that doesn't finish growing until mid-20s. Some researchers think late 20s, maybe even 30.
Wow.
So you're talking about major things to help you file, organize, start things, plan, make decisions, prioritize, remember, process. And you're not even done until you're like way into your adulthood. And that's why when it comes to adult ADHD, why it can be so hard to do like the things that you talk about. Just get organized. Just do the laundry. Just put away the toys. Like wash the dishes. How hard can it be? Well, for someone with ADHD or with executive functioning challenges, because you could have executive functioning challenges and not have ADHD. And so when you have those challenges, it makes it hard to do that simple thing that it feels like everybody else does so easily. And why is it so hard for me? Some people, when they are being challenged by that, they get so exhausted because they're having to work so hard just to remember things, how to make sure things run smoothly. And not because they're not trying, but it's because their brain is processing and prioritizing things differently than someone who doesn't have it.
Can you walk me through what someone who is experiencing this or being challenged by this might feel, whether it's a child being told, hey, clean your room, or an adult, a parent who knows like they have a mountain of laundry they need to tackle, but it feels really overwhelming? Like, is it just general overwhelm, like task initiation? I know you mentioned that, like just getting started can feel overwhelming. And I don't, and as far as I know, have ADHD. So I can only imagine that feels 10 times harder for someone with ADHD.
Absolutely. Task initiation is one of the real hard ones. A lot of when I look at articles, it even talks about, and when I meet with clients, task initiation or getting something started tends to be one of the hardest ones. And it's also reported that it feels physically painful to even get started. So getting the laundry started, getting the dishes started, getting the meal started, getting the gas on the way home, like starting something can feel very painful. But a big part of that is the overwhelm. That's exactly what it is, that you feel so overwhelmed by it. And I think on top of that, what often tends to come up is prioritizing. Like people think, oh, well, if you tell your kid to just clean their room, just clean your room. Like, what's the big deal? Like, or do your laundry. Like, what's the big deal? We'd list it like it's one task. We have it on the to-do list, do laundry, right? But it's not one task. So for example, cleaning your room, whether it's you or your kid, you have to figure out where to start first. Then maybe you have to put the dirty clothes on the floor in the hamper, the clean clothes on the floor on hangers or in the drawer, which means you have to fold them and find the hangers, making up the bed, taking out the trash out of the room, putting the pencils and the books on the bookshelf, picking up the toys and the Legos and putting it in the bins. It's all these things. And so it's not just clean your room, it's all the things. Same thing with laundry. You have to get the laundry, figure out what is dirty. You have to sort it. Do you have soap? Putting the soap and the clothes in the laundry, starting it, when it finishes, putting it in the dryer or hanging it up and then putting it away. Like there's a lot of steps. And so what happens is that, okay, well, maybe I can start it and then they don't finish it. Now my clothes have been in the washing machine for 3 days. And now I got to wash it all over again. Now I feel like a loser. And now the shame kicks in. And so I see with a lot of adult ADHD, there's a lot of overwhelm and then the shame. A lot of shame because they feel like I'm a grown adult. Dude, why is it so hard? Why can't I do this? And then if they have a kid with ADHD, that's like a double whammy. And many adults don't even realize they have it until they have kids, or the pressure and the overwhelm of all the things that you got to do as an adult. Because adulthood sucks sometimes of all the things you got to do. There's a lot of responsibilities. And if you were used to your parents doing it, your teacher's doing it, other people doing it for you, and now you're an adult and you have to adult on your own, then it can be very overwhelming. So yes, the overwhelm is a big thing and shame is a big one as well too, because they feel embarrassed now by it.
And I know shame runs really deep with having clutter too. And I hear this from women all the time. I'm smart. I should be able to figure this out. Maybe they're just super successful in their career, but then their home's a disaster. And I feel like a terrible mom. I can't believe I'm struggling. Everyone else has it figured out. Why is this hard for me? And I think a lot of us, we might not have the exact story, but that shame piece it's just like this fire in your belly. And it's just in my opinion, it just steals any hope. It's easy to just stay focused on that feeling because that feeling is overwhelming. So it's only adding to the overwhelm. Right. So when people come to you and they're feeling overwhelmed with, let's just talk about laundry or tasks. And obviously it's a lot of other things that it takes to manage a home, and task initiation can feel so challenging for someone with ADHD, kid or adult alike. I know my take, but obviously you're the expert. Where do we start? how do we get ourselves on board, and, model that for our kids and help them get on board with something like managing their items?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a big question. And
Yeah.
what I do, like I do executive function life coaching with adults and with teenagers, college students. And one of the first things that we do is we look at a checklist in terms of all the executive functioning challenges and which ones tend to be hard for them. And I think what that does is that it starts to normalize why it's hard. So I had a client one time, 17 years old, senior in high school, and just everything felt hard for her and she didn't understand it. And when we went through the checklist, and I've never seen this before, she had challenges in every single executive function skill, like every single one.
Wow.
I'm like, well, yeah. No, she couldn't even sit still long enough to even do the exercise. I was constantly fidgeting with her, the Rubik's Cube. It's like constant. And I'm like, everything was a challenge. And so I think starting with a checklist can be very helpful to really do an inventory of like, these are the things that are challenging. And then the second thing would be, how does that show up? So if you say you have a hard time with task initiation or organization, how does that show up? Oh, well, my backpack is always a mess. I'm always late paying my bills. My lights got turned off. My kids had to eat cereal for dinner because I forgot to go grocery shopping. Like, how does it show up in all the little small ways that become inconvenient? I ran out of gas while driving to work. So all of these things, like, how does it show up? How does lack of organization show up? How does poor task completion show up? How does poor planning or decision-making, emotional regulation, impulse control? How do these show up? And how does it become inconvenient for you? Because with ADHD, although, like I said earlier, you can have executive functioning challenges and not have the disorder, the thing is, if it's causing significant impairment in your life, it's significantly impacting your life. So yes, I have issues with papers, but not to the point where I'm running late on bills, where I can't find things. I can usually find it. It's in the pile, usually. And then really at the end of the week, I usually take the pile and I organize it. Once I can get on top of it, I'm fine. It doesn't cause significant impairment in my life. Now, did it at one point? Yes. There was a point when, like in college, where I would feel embarrassed for people to come to my room because I couldn't get my act together or whatever it was. But it's you just having to look at how does it show up and what does it look like for you? And then finding out also like what strategies or tips have you tried and it has worked? And then what other ones crash and burn for you? So like a timer can be really helpful for task initiation for many people. But if you have ADHD and anxiety, sometimes it can create more anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right? So it's really about kind of looking at this, creating an inventory, looking at how does it show up? Where are these challenges? And like, okay, now that makes sense. It would just be like years ago when I went to the doctor, I was feeling fatigued, not sure what's going on. Oh, your vitamin D is low. Well, why is vitamin D low? Well, maybe you're not getting enough sun. You're not outside enough. Well, that made sense. At the time I was working in a hospital, I hardly ever went outside during the day. So then with that knowledge, I was able to change things around, get some vitamin D, made sure I was out more often, and my levels went up. So having information can be very empowering. And I think being able to, once you go from the checklist, then understanding what ADHD is, what is executive functioning, what is your frontal lobe, how do all these things get managed, and then what do you do about it? And so I think being empowered with the education of it can be really powerful. And I find that it can be very powerful for people too.
And disarming that shame, which keeps us stuck. So what I'm hearing is that, well, let's just say you have ADHD and IDHD, and we're overwhelmed with our home, laundry, all the things. And you might say, we look at the exact same checklist to see, okay, what part of it, of these processes am I really afraid of or struggle with? And maybe you check off task initiation while I check off task completion. So is that what I'm hearing, right? So even though we both have ADHD, a few of those markers might be really high for you, and I can have something a little bit different.
Absolutely. The thing is that it doesn't look the same. Everybody's different with it, because there are ADHDers that I've met that are straight A students, very neat and organized. They'd come to my office and they organize things on the desk or whatever it is. Like they very organized, but they are really bad at regulating their emotions and maintaining friendships. But then someone else might be really disorganized, can't find anything, have great friends, and can't how to figure things out and how to finish something, how to start something. So it can look different for every single person because there's so many different executive functions, and it depends on what has been developed and what has been a challenge for you in whatever way. But the good news though is that they're skills, they're executive function skills. So just like you can learn to declutter your life because it's a skill, you can learn to be organized. it might take more effort. So organizing my papers, which I'm much better at now, takes more effort because I have to be very intentional about it. My husband is great at organizing, but he's really bad at starting something.
So he'll let the thing build and build and build and build until it gets maybe overwhelming or too much of a, daily stressor. And then he'll go, okay, I'm going to take the time to organize this.
Right. Like he would rather, for me with laundry, I rather do a load every day rather than spending all Saturday doing it. He rather do it all day on Saturday. I don't want to do that. So I wash the dishes as I go. I load the dishwasher every day and run it every day. I wipe down the counters before going to bed. I make up the bed every morning. I do laundry 1 or 2 loads every day. Now I wasn't always like this, but that is what I have. For me, it helps me in terms of not getting overwhelmed by starting a task, by just doing a little bit every day.
I feel the same way. So also going back to what you said too, what works for me and you might not work for someone else because they might feel anxious about knowing that they have to do laundry every few days. And so I think this is where, and this is your expertise. It's layered, it's complex, it's personal, it's nuanced. Mm-hmm. So what are some strategies that you use for adults or kids, with ADHD to help manage that organizing and decision-making and routines, which I know is certainly a big part of, the home clutter piece? Where do you start?
Yeah. So it all depends on what it is the biggest challenge. So one big thing, depending on your time, your resources, the people that you have around you, externalizing as much as you can. Because there are things that we take on, and they say this, especially like if you're a woman in business, they say that a lot, that so often as women in business, we do so much of the things on ourselves. We do it rather than giving it to other people to do, having an assistant, having a colleague, having a spouse, whatever, doing it. So I think externalizing, for example, we used to do a lot of the yard work. Well, my husband does a lot of the yard work, but it would take him all day. And he's just like, this sucks. And so we're like, let's just hire someone. Costs $70 to hire someone to come out every month. Like, to me, that's so well worth it. And so externalizing things, maybe externalizing the cleaning, externalizing laundry pickup, externalizing giving it to your kids. But sometimes externalizing things can be very helpful, but it doesn't always have to be about paying someone money. Externalizing can also be using tools. Like if you have to write something or do homework. I do this a lot with kids for homework, or adults who needed to write their notes or get started on a project. The Pomodoro is a great app. Means tomato in Italian. It's a great timer app, and you set it and it starts 20 or 25 minutes. You do a task nonstop, 5-minute break. And what it does, especially with ADHDers operate in a now, not now time zone. So if something's not due now, it's not due. So I got my bill, but it's due at the end of the month, so it ain't due. And so then the time management piece, which is an executive function skill, gets lost. Then now it's in your pile, and now you don't even know where it is. So externalizing things like timers, setting alarms, having lists that you will actually look at. So your brain may not reliably remind you of things, but the tools can. Having, you have something, you have to sign something for your kid, put it in your task list right away, and then set the date and the time. So that way you don't have to remember, because your brain, there's energy zappers that occur when we feel like, oh, I have to make sure I remember that. And now you're taxing yourself, which is why so many adults are exhausted. You're now taxing your brain to remember something that it's impossible. You can't remember all the things. So you set it in your app and you put it in to remind you at that time. And then another one is breaking tasks down into smaller steps so they feel less overwhelming. That's a really, really big one. So that way you're not waiting to the last minute, but you're breaking it down into chunks, which is why I do my laundry about a load every day, because it's just easier for me. Or as we use the dishes, we wash it. As you're cooking, you clean. When you wake up in the morning, you make up your bed. Like you're just kind of getting into the routine of doing these things. Or like meal prepping, you think about before starting, think about what are all the items that I need. So even before starting, you look at the recipe, what are all the items I need? What are all the measuring spoons and cups that I need? So any of those kinds of things that helps with organization and prioritizing. A big, big one is pairing a task that you find miserable or boring or mundane with something you find fun or enjoyable. So you hate washing the dishes or cleaning the toilet, play your favorite song and music or music videos. Watch your show, a favorite show while folding the laundry, setting a timer while watching a show, doing the laundry, so that way you're kind of staying on task. But delegating and externalizing, that kind of stuff, because with an ADHD brain, many times they will strive on structure and accountability. So having someone do it for you or checking in on you or even doing it alongside them, that's the body doubling piece, can be really helpful. So even talking to your mom, a friend, a spouse, a kid while doing the task can really feel more energizing and help you get the task done. So there's lots of different ways, but again, it really depends on where are your skills that are weaker and trying to do it in the most efficient way possible.
So what I'm hearing is that a big part of it comes from just taking some time to get to know, whether it's you, your partner with ADHD, maybe a child, and get to understand them specifically, because it's so nuanced, versus going and being like, oh, maybe I read an article on ADHD and like doing laundry, and just giving them, which I think some of these checklists are a little atrocious. Like I saw a 25-step checklist and I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. So we need to give me so much on the checklist, but really tailoring it to the person. And do you think when it comes to, because you're a mom, you know this, but sometimes it's like, and I hear this from students, once they're like, oh, I'm going to onboard my kid into picking them after themselves and putting their backpack away and cleaning the room and doing their laundry, we kind of want to do it all at once and be like, here's these checklists, here's these tasks, here's my expectation. Like we come in so much before they have the skills to take on these things. So for my listeners who have kids, ADHD or not, my question is, so we have the awareness for ADHD kids. Here's where maybe they need a little more support. How do we pick the task maybe to teach them first? Is that also based on kind of their strengths?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it does depend on their strength and their desire. So it should be kind of chunked out in different ways. So there are certain things that your kid might like to do. Maybe they like to dust, maybe they like to vacuum, or they like to clean the toilet or wash the dishes or whatever it is. That don't get so bogged down in giving them like the 10, 20 things to do for chores. That's just too overwhelming, especially with ADHD, because that's where a lot of they do everything halfway, because they don't know how to maintain attention. For many of them, the attention is a big piece of it. And they get sidetracked really easily. So you tell them to clean their room and they come across an old costume from when they were 3 and they love Frozen. And now they want to watch Frozen again. And now you're like, what are you doing? Why are you watching Frozen when you're supposed to be cleaning your room? Well, they got sidetracked because it's hard to do a task when it's so unstructured. So you have to be very specific. And that's where the body doubling can come in. So you go with your kid in the room and you say, okay, wow, this room is special. So let's do this together. All right. So, and I do this with my kids often. So, okay, you pick up the books and I'll pick up all your hangers. All right, good. Let's time ourselves. Good. Listening to music while we're doing it, having a conversation while doing it. All right, you get your stuffed toys off the floor. I'll make up the bed. You put the stuffed toys on the bed once I'm done. All right, good. Good job. All right, let's go to the next thing. All right, looks like there's a bunch of trash. Let's get a trash bag, put these in. So you're kind of delegating and structuring, but you're kind of being like a foreman and you're guiding them through it, because what you're doing is you're helping them build a skill of planning and judgment and decision-making and how to set priorities, how to stay focused, how to not get overwhelmed by the task. Those are all executive function skills. And we can't expect them to know how to do that if we're just throwing it all in. So we have to determine like what is the most important. Yes, all of these things need to get done, but all of those things can't get done by your ADHD kid. It's just not possible. So narrow it down to 3 to 5 things maybe, and just say, okay, choose 1 or 2 things that they love doing that they do without being reminded. And 1 or 2 things that they may need to get more guidance on and get lots of reminders on. Because a lot of these kids, they get so many negative messaging about, again, the shame and the overwhelm. Like you never do anything right. You now lost your phone. You lost your privileges. So there's so much shame that goes into it. We want to build them up to succeed. So setting them up for success and letting them do the tasks that they do without being reminded. And then a couple that they need maybe more guidance and more reminders. And then the rest, you let go or you do it on your own.
I love the body doubling aspect. And even as you were, sharing the example that you have 2 boys, right?
No, a girl and a boy.
Girl and a boy. Okay. With your kids, I'm like, I'm ready to go. Like, okay, let's go. Like, so there's so many aspects of it, like the teamwork aspect versus like, I'm overwhelmed and I'm supposed to do this all by myself. I'm isolated, I'm distracted, I failed at this before. Like, think about all this mental stuff that comes up for someone who's experienced that, kid or adult. So I love the talking out loud piece. I love the timer piece, if that resonates. As you said, it could help or hurt or hinder depending on you or your child. And the modeling, in that you're helping them prioritize. You're not saying, okay, you figure it out. You're saying, here, let's start with the trash, because the trash really stinks. So like, let's just collect the trash first and I'll work on your books. There's so many pieces in this, Dr. Lockhart, where I'm like, yes, like this is what they need, versus like, I was never taught how to clean my room growing up. It was just clean your room or like you're grounded. And I'm like, okay, so what did I shoved all my dirty clothes under my bed or in the closet or in the hamper, gave my mom way too much laundry. And just like, that was it. You too?
Yep. Same here. And my mom is like meticulously neat. She knows where everything is. If I ask her any question, I'm like, hey, Mom, do you have that picture from when I had that sleepover with my best friends when I was 9? She knows exactly where to look. She has a list for everything. Everything is so organized. Like, she is such a neat person. And she has 3 kids who were all messy. We were so messy. And so that was the same thing, just shoving everything and forgetting everything and then getting overwhelmed.
So she never taught you, which maybe someone taught her, maybe came more naturally to her. You would know this, but she never like thought of it. I think we have to think of it as a life skill, right?
It is a life skill. Yeah.
And skills need to be taught and modeled. And like what you shared in that beautiful example with the body doubling does so many things. I just read an interesting article. I love to read articles on life skills, and how in this particular study, they found that kids who did chores, contributions, whatever you want to call them, mowing the lawn, doing the dishes, cleaning the bathrooms, ended up being happier as adults. And it raised their self-esteem and their confidence because I feel capable. And I think of anyone, ADHDers need to feel confidence, because that helps you step out of that shame piece and embrace who you are, which I'm sure is challenging sometimes when you have ADHD and you look at it like a negative, because it can be a challenge. And I was like, yes, like, so it's just really, the scope is much bigger than just like you're teaching your kid to clean their room here.
Right.
And I think that's
and
really
I think people
powerful.
need to also, and they need to remember too, that there's 2 different conversations, right? There's ADHD, which it's neurodivergent. So they're more challenged by these simple tasks. But a kid, until they leave your home, I mean, that could be till they're 40, but still, until they really leave your home as an adult, they will have more skill building to do in these areas. So even if you have a 10-year-old without ADHD, it's still a skill to learn how to organize and how to clean your room. It's still a skill to learn how to prioritize and finish or start a task. So whether ADHD or not, it's still a skill building. It's just harder when there's ADHD involved.
So does this start with a conversation, maybe a family meeting or something, when it comes to, obviously in a lot of homes, it's the parent, sometimes the mom, who's the spearhead of like really wanting to just get the home in order. Especially, it's the first quarter of the year, people are decluttering and they're organizing. And we also are seeing our family undoing some of our hard work. So when it comes to ADHD and maybe your child has a diagnosis, or you have a diagnosis, like, do we need to talk about that regularly as a family? How do we lift each other up? Where do we start? We need to pick one task maybe to master. And then once I can kind of step out of the body doubling as the parent and the modeler, then it turns into a visual checklist that maybe your child can hang in their room and follow. Am I going in the right direction for my listeners?
Yes, absolutely. It's very collaborative. And I always tell parents it should be a collaborative discussion, not like what you need to do is. It's more collaborative. So you use a lot of observational and notice language. So for example, we noticed that our kids were having a hard time. My son is in 7th grade, daughter's in 9th grade. And they were having a hard time getting started on their homework or staying focused on their homework. But what was happening was there was this drift, which will happen, where they started doing their homework in their rooms. And now they're getting distracted by their music and a text message from a friend. And now I'm like, why is it taking you so long to do homework? So then we said, okay, I notice that it's been taking you longer to do your homework when before you used to finish pretty quickly. And I know how much you want your free time so that you're not doing homework all night and you can get your rest. Are you noticing that? Yes. What are you noticing that's taking so long? Why is it taking so long for you? What are you noticing? Oh, I'm getting very distracted and then I get overwhelmed and I just shut down. Okay, so let's get back to you doing your homework at the kitchen table. So that way you can stay focused. You can ask us if there's a challenge that you're having and you can get done quickly. And oh my gosh, their grades went skyrocketed up. They were done quicker. They had more free time. It was amazing. And I'm just like, why didn't we do this sooner? And again, I think as parents, we have to remember that it's very easy to start the year with all these big lofty goals. And then what happens is there's this drift, which is why all the gyms are like full the first few days. And then by the end of the month, it's empty again because people like have all these big lofty ideas. I'm going to declutter my entire house and I'm going to like take all the stuff out of my garage and donate it to charity. Right. And then it's too much.
Yes.
We burn ourselves out and then we drift back into old habits because it's familiar. It's easier.
And it's what our brain is used to. So it's less brain power, right?
Exactly.
Our default is less brain power. Our brain loves habits. It saves brain energy. So it's it's how we're wired.
Right. And so having this collaborative discussion about what you notice, what can be helpful, and even asking them, because that helps to bring their brain into problem solving mode, another executive function skill. Problem solving. Yes, I notice that it takes me too long to do blank, so I need to do this. Or yes, we've been needing to declutter our garage. How can we get started? Right? Well, let's just start with the stuff we just need to throw away and this part of the garage first, whatever it is. But having a collaborative discussion, what is getting in the way? And then what can we do together to get it done? And then setting a time limit for it. So that way you don't get overwhelmed by the task. And then you can feel proud of what you've done as you've gotten to this point. So yes, absolutely have discussions about it, make it collaborative and engage your kid, engage your spouse in the solution so that you can get to the end goal. And you have to ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Why is it important to do blank? It's not about having a Pinterest ready house or room or whatever. What is the real goal? Well, I want to be able to find my bills. I want to know where my things are. I want to not feel so overwhelmed by stuff. I don't want to have a messy house. I don't enjoy having a messy house. Like, what is it? What is the real issue? And then doing it together to say, okay, let's do a checklist. Let's do a chore list. Let's just focus on you all doing these 3 things. My kids are only responsible for the game room that they occupy, their bathroom, and their bedroom. That's it. So everything else we do, because it's like, that's enough. Because then after a while, then it becomes so much on us to be able to say, hey, make sure you do the laundry downstairs for us or whatever. You're doing all these extra things when it then can create more overwhelm and then it creates more brain power for you as an adult.
Do you think a good place to start after you choose, let's just say cleaning, let's just go with that example. Like the parent and the child say, yeah, like, let's just get a handle and teach you these skills on cleaning your room. Yeah. After they do the body doubling, at what point do we, as parents, transfer from the body doubling to something else? Like that's not so, your time and energy isn't necessary. Is it? And do they go straight to a checklist after?
Yeah, that's hard to know. I mean, it depends on some kids. That's where the reset, I try to go from the body doubling to the reset. So telling parents to guide their kids in resetting their space every morning and every evening. So when you wake up and you get ready for school, you're going to reset your room. Just make up the bed, pick up stuff off the floor, get your hangers, pajamas are hung, make it as easy as possible so that there are things available for them and it doesn't become overwhelming. It should take 5 or 10 minutes to reset your room. And then at the end of the day, the same thing, the reset. And that should not require you to be present after you've been body doubling for a while. So that they're literally taking 5 or 10 minutes and you're resetting your room before you go to bed. You're picking up your stuff off the floor, putting your shoes back in the closet. Your backpack is where it needs to be. Your clothes are ready for tomorrow. And your room is, so then in the morning, there should be only the things that you need to clean up are the things that you use that morning because you already reset last night. And so that, for me, I think the body doubling, the next step is probably the resetting.
Yeah.
And I think that makes, just like the kitchen, you eat and then you reset the kitchen. You put everything in the dishwasher, you set it up, wipe down the counters.
And so what I'm noticing here, and this is brilliant, and I absolutely advocate for this, is doing a reset. You're integrating it into a natural flow and rhythm of your day. Your kid isn't sitting watching TV or doing their homework at the kitchen table. And then you going, oh, 5 o'clock. According to my watch, you need to go upstairs and clean your room. And they're like, what?
Right.
So you're so where you are in the moment in integrating these opportunities to do, even if you can't do a full reset, maybe you don't have time to do a full kitchen reset after dinner because you got to get the kids to whatever, martial arts, you do 2 minutes worth of a reset where you are based on the flow. And transition times going from room to room or activity to activity or inside to outdoors for playtime are really great times to do this. And again, less brain energy required. So I'm thinking for a neurodivergency, but anybody, it's not like, how am I, Katie and Dr. Ann Louise are telling me I got to do a reset now. That drudgery feeling and that energy, that's gone when you do it how you described it.
Right. And it, like you said, I love the way you said that. It's just the flow. So like after we record this, I have one more meeting after this. And then the way I reset my home office is I'll take my microphone, take my connections, take my camera, put it in it. I have a case that I put it in, and now that's in my bin for when I go back to work on Monday. So now that space, the mostly is reset.
Hey, we're not about perfection, as you know.
Right. Right. It's just, and then having, I have things where it needs to be. I'll take my water bottle, put it in the sink, whatever it is like that. It's just resetting the space instead of having to do a whole bunch of things. Before I go to bed, I just fold up my blanket that I was using, and tidy up the stuff, move things. It's just a few minutes. And so again, it should be part of the flow, not like, oh, no, I got to do all this stuff again. And it's about the progress. It's not being perfect. And it's about modeling it so that your kids can pick up on it over time.
You mentioned a word earlier that stuck in my head, and that is desire. So if you have an ADHDer who has no desire to clean the room, follow up with their portion of the laundry or whatever the task is, what then?
Yes, that's a good question. Whenever I see a behavior and there's resistance, there's defiance, there's lack of motivation, I think as adults and as parents, it's so easy for us to see the behavior and then want to lecture, nag, or punish it. But what we have to do, we have to pay attention to what's driving the behavior. And that's where getting curious comes in again. So if you see a kid who's like, I don't want to clean my room, like, what's the big deal? Then asking, that's a good question. What is the big deal? A big thing that I say a lot is join the resistance. Like join them in that resistance. Why are they resistant? School sucks. Yeah, school can suck. Why do I have to clean a room? It's my room. Yeah, you're right. It is your room. Why do you have to clean your room? So asking them about that, like, what is hard about it for you? When you think about cleaning your room, what's hard about it for you? And being curious about it, joining them where they're at and finding the real need or thing that's driving that behavior, because it's often not what we think it is. So you have a kid who has an attitude. Why do you have an attitude? Well, maybe they had a bad day at school. Maybe their best friend just dumped them. Maybe they got a failing grade. We have to be curious about what's going on. So I think if you have a kid who doesn't have a desire to clean their room, then you have to be willing to have that discussion. And I also think that as parents, we have to not prioritize all this neatness at the expense of the relationship, right? We have all these big blow up fights about your kid's room. And you may have to get to, because I have seen some professionals talk about that the public spaces in the home need to be tidied and neat and maintained, and you leave your kid's room alone. I don't fully agree with that because I don't think it's really teaching them any skills, but I also don't believe that you need to fight tooth and nail and then destroy the relationship over a messy room. I think we have to then meet in the middle and find out what's so hard about it. Maybe they have too much stuff in their room. Maybe their space, they have too many things for the space that they have. Maybe they minimize the things that they actually have so that it is easier. Like if it's that hard to clean your room, maybe you got too much stuff.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, just opening up with curiosity and just that conversation. So like, what's going on? It was months ago, my son, so he's 9 and he was like kind of off all week and he, getting home from school. He didn't hang up his backpack, kind of do his normal routine, wasn't unpacking his stuff and just aggravated. And so I was annoyed. I'll be honest. I'm like, really? You dumped your backpack on the floor, all the things that trigger us, shoes or where he, and it's kind of like what I wanted to say is, better. But I personally try my darndest to never say that because that creates so much shame. And that's my internal dialogue, how I talk to myself. Right. So I'm like working on that. And instead of saying, better, I was like, I got down on his level and this brings tears to my eyes. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, this week is horrible. This happened at school and it didn't even have to do with the task itself. Yeah. And I was like, oh, dude, I get it. That sounds really tough. Thanks for telling me. Like, hey, next time that happens, we work as a team. So let me know. I'm happy to help you unpack your backpack and do all these things. And the relief on his face, there's so many beautiful aspects to it. And I was just like, yes, okay, I don't win. I feel like a winning parent every day. But this one moment, I'm like, this is my win for like the year. But like you said, sometimes it does have to do with the task. Like there's so much stuff in the space. I don't know where to start. I feel overwhelmed. And sometimes it's just, I had a crummy day at work or a crummy day at school. And I don't feel like doing this right now. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I think that's as parents, whether there's ADHD or not, for ourselves or for our kids, we always have to prioritize the relationship over the correction every time. Because so often there are things going on in their world, in people's world, that we have no idea what's really going on. And we get so focused in, and I hear parents say this a lot. My husband and I have had this discussion. He's like, well, if we don't correct it now, then they won't learn their lesson. And I'm like, that's not necessarily true. So often kids already know when they mess up. We know when we mess up. And getting a big old long lecture doesn't really teach any lesson. And I think we have to remember that's why this big, as we start out, when I love that we start out with this whole idea of overwhelm and shame, those emotions drive a lot of behaviors. And if the way our brain works is if our brain is processing really complicated, toxic, uncomfortable emotions, we're not going to think straight. And our executive function and skills are definitely not going to kick in. And if we feel so overwhelmed, emotions win every time. So if I feel overwhelmed by the task, if I feel like shame, I feel all these different things, I'm not going to pay my bills, even though I know better. I know that I'm supposed to, and I know that I should organize myself. I know that I should do my laundry. But if I feel bad about myself and I feel like I'm a loser parent, I'm not going to do those things. I'm not going to want to do those things because my emotions are now going to rule. So instead, we have to be curious about our emotions and really ask ourselves, what is this emotion telling me that I need? And meet that need instead, whether it's for our kid or for ourselves. Well, I feel really ashamed that I didn't get blank done. Okay, well, what is that telling me that I need to do? I need to have a better system in place. I need to have less things. I need to donate the stuff that's been riding around in my trunk for 6 months, right? So how can I get that done?
Beautiful. So where can my listeners connect with you? Because I could keep talking to you all day. And I know you'll be back on the show. We already decided before I hit record.
So I'm most active on Instagram at dr.annlouise.lockhart, and I share tips and resources for parents, adults with ADHD, individuals with ADHD. I have a private practice in San Antonio, Texas called A New Day Pediatric Psychology, and we offer therapy for those living in Texas, and as well as life coaching and parent coaching for people who live anywhere. So they can always reach out at anewdaysa.com. And then I try to be more active on YouTube. My goal for the new year is to do that. My son told me I need to up my YouTube game because he's like, your Instagram is on point, but YouTube is whack. I'm like, I know. So I'm hopefully going to work with this guy who does videos for physicians and doctors and psychologists and have him help me with that stuff. So then you can also find me on YouTube at Dr. Louise Lockhart, but it's not great yet. It's a work in progress. So
isn't everything and aren't we all?
Totally. And most importantly, my book should be launching this week called Love the Teen You Have. Yes. And it's really a book for parents of tweens and teens between 9 and 19. And it covers all the things we talked about and so much more. It's just like a manual for parenting for that age group.
So one last question before we say goodbye.
Yes.
Another new tradition. You are just getting all the new traditions on the show today. What is one thing in your home that you'd never let go of? And
that I would never let go of?
Never let go of.
Oh my gosh. What would I never let go of? Probably a good, comfortable chair. I got this circular chair in my office and it's so soft. It's chenille, it's comfortable. And I really like a good, comfortable chair with a blanket. And that's probably something I would never let go of. It's just with the work that I do in helping and holding people's emotions and things, it's nice to come home to a space where I can just relax. And so I think that's probably my prized thing.
Oh, that sounds so perfect. And I love chenille too. It's so cozy.
Yes.
Well, you go on with your bad self. You keep that chair and that cozy blanket. And I know you're big on the declutter journey too. So I'm really proud of you. You've mentioned a lot of your progress as we've gotten to know each other. So
yes.
Keep up the great work. Thanks for being on the show today, Dr. Lockhart.
Thank you, Katie.